Thank you, and welcome to Caliper's webinar, How to Get New Employees Up to Speed Faster. I'm Patrick Sweeney, the president of Caliper. Today we're going to be sharing with you some very interesting insights from consultants as well as executives on how they've been making people more effective from day one, whether they're in a leadership role or starting their very first job. In the next hour, we're going to be talking about how to utilize coaching for new hires and managers, how to create a productive onboarding experience, how top companies are giving their new employees a head start in their new roles, and specific ways in which new employees can work most effectively with their managers and their team. Before we dive in, I'd like to introduce Herb Greenberg, Caliper's founder and CEO. Herb, as we come out of these tough times and companies are beginning to think about hiring again, there's much to consider. Certainly there's much more talent available now. So assessing that talent and making sure that you're bringing on someone who can not only succeed in the position you're looking for now, but who can really grow with your company is so very important.
Consider this an opportunity for a lot of highly qualified people. The only other thing that should be added here is that no matter how good an individual is, that first onboarding can make all the difference in the world between someone being a successful employee and someone failing. The best thing to do is, first of all, to focus on the individual, coach him or her on the culture, make them as comfortable as possible with what the scene that they're entering. Also, what we like to do is know who the manager is going to be. Who is the individual going to be working with? With the new employee, it becomes vital to know the manager, talk with someone about how do we work together. Know these things in advance so that when they start working together and these things crop up, which they will, they can look at each other and laugh and say, that's what we were talking about in the onboarding. That knowledge between the two of them, knowledge of themselves and knowledge of each other, is absolutely as essential to the success of the individual as the choice of the individual to begin with.
Companies used to do this sort of coaching of new employees in a more casual way, but now we've formalized this into a process we call the accelerator. And what it does, as you says, is it gives the individual who's being brought on a head start. It gives them a heads up on how they can be most effective.
It's like a pitcher and a catcher in baseball. If the catcher doesn't know what the pitcher is going to throw, that ball could go to the backstop and be a wild pitch. They got to know each other. And in the same way, the manager and the employee have to know each other, and that's where the onboarding process goes on, to make sure that that's in place as the individual comes to work.
Thank you so much, Herb. I'd like to turn now to George Bruff to speak a little more about this process. George is a director of Caliper in Brazil, and he has vast global experience with counseling and coaching both individuals and teams to help them improve their performance. It's great to have you back with us again, George.
Great to be back, Patrick.
We're going to focus now on onboarding, in particular, a phrase that is used by some companies, but really what we're talking about is, unfortunately, knock on wood, I mean, things seem to be getting a little bit better now. Hiring is on the increase, at least in some companies, some industries, and so who you bring on is particularly important, because anyone who's looking to hire is looking at an enormous amount of top talented people who, through no fault of their own, may have lost their job over the last year or so. That selection process becomes very, very difficult. But then you're also talking about, how does someone become effective in this new culture that they're moving into? How do they know how to hit the ground running?
There's a lot of things involved in that. Let's start looking at it structurally. One of the issues that many organizations face is that they see the recruitment and selection process as being different from the people management or the development process, often done by different people, even within the HR function. So you will have someone who's involved in helping to recruit and select the person, and it's almost like my job is done when the person signs the contract.
Right, right.
Whereas
Okay.
in actual fact, that's when the real work begins, because that's when you start paying the person, and that's when you start expecting results from them. And sometimes even managers fall into that trap. Let's say it's an organization where HR are doing the selection process together with the line manager. But very often the line manager will think, well, my job's done, I've filled that seat, I've got the person on board, you're a great person, now it's up to you to go off and do things.
That chair is not empty any longer.
Exactly.
My job is done.
Yes.
Mhm.
So there's a structural piece there. When we're consulting with organizations, we're trying to help them see a cradle to grave approach. But I mean, from when you first start that recruiting process right the way through until the person leaves the organization should be seamless, because it's the same person. Now, you might have different people coming in and out of the relationship at different times to offer different help and support. But you shouldn't see, my job's done, I've hired the person, or this person has an issue, let's send them to somewhere else. The second thing just to look at, which I think is really the heart of what we call onboarding. And onboarding can be typically one of these terms that we throw out there that actually may frighten off more people than it attracts. Onboarding can be as simple as spending a little bit of time with a new employee, right the way through to a formal 90-day onboarding process that's highly structured. All of those things are about getting that new employee up to speed. And the reason that this is important is that you don't necessarily know what's going to work in that new organization, and the new organization doesn't necessarily know who you are and where your strengths lie. So you go back to that old adage that you have one opportunity to make a first impression. And that's what onboarding is. Onboarding is helping the person fit into the organization, into the organization's culture, into the department, and into the team.
What are some ways to help someone with that, though? Because a lot of times, part of how that fits has to do with who the new manager is, how they like to work with people, what their expectations are. And some people might not be as clear or as self-aware of how they work and what they look for. How do you make it so that when somebody comes on, they get a clear sense of expectations and things that they can do so that they come across most positively, most effectively?
Okay, let's imagine a managerial type position. So somebody has been hired by this company for a managerial type position. What are some of the things that they can do? First of all, whoever was involved in the recruitment and selection process, be it a recruiter or HR or a combination of both, should share all of the information that they have about the person before they actually get into the job. So the HR team and the recruiter can sit down with the candidate, who is now not a candidate, he's now the new manager of the organization, and say, for example, here's your Caliper profile. Many organizations don't do that. HR have the information and any kind of assessment that they might have done on the person, but also their impressions that came out of the interview process. Here's where we think you'll particularly be strong in our organization. Here are some of the concerns that we might have. Share that with the person before they get on board, and also have a structured plan for them to help them think through, what is your leadership style? What impression do you want to make? How do you plan to communicate with your new team members? How do you plan to communicate with your new colleagues? Very, very few organizations sit down and have that kind of conversation with a candidate who's now coming into their organization. And yet it's actually really simple and doesn't cost an awful lot of money.
Now, I know Caliper helps many of our clients with that. How does Caliper help companies make sure that that person who's brought on has the right experience and gets a sense of the world that's around them, how they can become most effective most quickly?
There are several things that Caliper specifically brings to an engagement like this. One, of course, is our expertise in helping people understand potential and helping people understand how to use that information to change their behavior.
Right.
So you're helping people understand, what is this information and how can I use it? And there are organizations who could do that. An HR function could do that within the company. However, most HR companies don't have the resources. I mean, how many HR generalists have time to onboard 2, 3, 5 people a week, or however many worldwide within the organization?
Well, and particularly now when so many organizations have had to cut back, certainly in the past year and a half, 2 years.
Absolutely right. The other thing that I think we bring is we do a lot of this, so we are specialists at it, and there's a lot involved in it, I think. It's not just the ability to help someone interpret the information, but a lot of the competencies that we would put into a coaching program would come into a conversation like this. Helping someone set good goals, helping someone understand the consequences of decisions that they might want to make, helping them think through the process and what's the most effective way of getting to their goals and objectives. So there are many of the competencies that a Caliper consultant would use in coaching that we would also use in an onboarding type engagement.
Right, right. I'd like to explore that idea further, and someone who could really help us with that is Heidi Ankeny. Heidi is an account consultant at Caliper. And Heidi, how long have you been here?
I've been here 15 years.
15 years, that's marvelous. You have a very strong following among so many of our clients, and you've been so helpful in terms of the advice. It's wonderful, the relationships you've developed.
Well, thank you. I really take pride in trying to make sure that I understand what my customers need and understand what Caliper is able to provide to them, and to marry all of that together to make a positive outcome.
And what we're talking about now, Caliper's always been known for hiring and developing top performers. And what we want to talk about now is how those two, as you were just saying, can blend. The notion of bringing somebody on who's brand new and coaching them immediately on how to be most effective in the environment in which they're working, how to connect better with their boss, how to understand the culture that they're working in, and how to get over any hesitations they might have so they can hit the ground running. And so we'd love to hear you talk about how you've been doing that for some of your clients.
When I'm on the phone with a client, I try to get a very good understanding of what are you looking for this person to be able to do for you and / or your customers. And so when we first get a profile, we'll certainly ask for some sort of written job description, which I like to say it's a list of tasks and responsibilities, but it's kind of flat. It's kind of black and white. So when I have an opportunity to speak with my client, then I want to know how much more information can that client give me in terms of what do you really want this person to be able to do. In other words, I want them to add color to the job description to help me understand what they're really looking for. And in particular, because we are doing a personality assessment, I want to know things like maybe in the past you had someone in the role who wasn't a team player, and for this particular department they really need to have a tight team that works well together. So sometimes they'll give me information in terms of what's not working and what they do want, or sometimes conversely they do have a really good list of, I know these are things that I want in this person. I know that I maybe am not good at coaching or hand-holding, so I need someone who's a little bit more independent. So first we kind of set the stage for success in terms of defining what do you actually need.
That's excellent, because the tasks can be in those bullet points, as you've described, but will they be able to truly collaborate? Can they connect with others well? Will they listen? And in between that is what I hear you saying is where the color comes from.
Exactly. So if we set the stage for that initially when we're looking to hire the right person, then the development of that person or subsequent onboarding coaching that's done, half my work's already done. We've already set the stage. Now what we want to do is we've got the manager embedded in the process in terms of they know what they're looking for, they know how they are in relationship to how they can act or interact with that individual, and now the job changes a little in terms of having conversation with that new employee so that they can better understand how they fit to the culture, how they fit into that department, how they can use their strengths to their advantage in terms of performing in that new role, and recognizing where they may be somewhat limited and helping them find ways to become stronger at doing those things that they may have not had either access to training in the past or haven't had to do it in the past, so it's a completely new task.